In this class, we're going to consider how you solve quadratic equations when you can factorize the quadratic expression. So remember, a quadratic equation is just a quadratic expression set equal to 0, but the quadratic expression can be in different formats. So it could be like this guy, which is a trinomial. It could be this type where you would factorize using a common factor, or it could be a difference of squares like that type up there. And then it can be variations on these, so it could be a number here, it could be a number in front of the x squared term. So solving quadratic equations by factorizing is very skillful. It requires quite a lot of practice, and it requires quite a lot of being able to adapt to different situations, like on the fly. But let's just backtrack for a moment. So in general, a quadratic equation is a quadratic expression, ax squared plus bx plus c, set equal to 0, okay? But how we solve this will depend on the structure of this. If it's a trinomial, like that guy and that guy, then we can factorize into two brackets, and then we can do something from there. So that would be something like plus or minus some a value, plus or minus some b value, although it could be an a and a b. It could be the same, a letter or number here and here. If it's a difference of squares, that also factorizes into two brackets. That would be like this guy up here. But in that case, the numbers are the same, so it would be an a and an a, but one plus and one minus. Okay, so that's just how we factorize those guys. You may be familiar with all of these factorizing types already. And then the third type, this type here, we use a common factor, usually of x, but it could be some number, so like some a value in front of the x, and then x plus or minus some other value in the bracket. Okay, so we'll kind of look at some of these as we go through. So quadratic equation is just a quadratic expression equal to 0, and you've got your three types of factorizing depending on the three types of quadratic expression, and then we just solve them from there, and we'll explain how we solve them using these two examples. So these guys are both trinomials. They're both going to factorize into two brackets. We're not going to chat about the factorizing in this class. I'm going to assume you already know how to factorize a trinomial. So for this one, we would need an x and an x, a 4 and a 3 to make the 12. 4 times 3 gives you 12. 4x plus 3x gives you the 7x. And then all we do is split these off into two little mini equations. So you go 4 plus x plus 4 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. So all that I've done there, once you've got it factorized, so factorizing is like step 1, that takes you to there. All that I've then done is to take this bracket and make it into an equation, and take this bracket and make that into an equation. So you're separating x plus 4 equals 0 into one equation, x plus 3 equals 0 into your second equation. If you look at these, these are fairly trivial linear equations. You just solve them by moving the number to the other side. So you would get x equals minus 4 for the first one, and x equals minus 3 for the second one. So we've got our two unique solutions there for that quadratic equation. Done. Okay, so moving on to the next guy. Slightly more difficult factorizing maybe, looking at the numbers there. So still a trinomial, still factorizes into two brackets. We need an x and an x. To make a 15, we would need a 5 and a 3, and it needs to be a plus 5 and a minus 3, because plus 5x minus 3x would give you plus 2x. So again, all that I've done is factorize. Sorry, I don't need my red pen yet, getting ahead of myself. All I'm going to do is to split the factors off into two equations. So x minus 3 equals 0. Now I can use my red pen to say that that equation is just based on that bracket, and that one like that. You don't need to be drawing red lines on these, it's just for illustration, of course. So this would give us a solution of x equals negative 5, and this is x equals positive 3. So that's our two solutions for that guy. And that is essentially the process for solving a quadratic equation. You take your quadratic expression, you evaluate it. In other words, you say, what kind is it? Is it a trinomial? Is it a difference of squares? Or is it a common factor type factorizing? Once you've decided on that, you perform the factorizing, which hopefully you know what to do with already. If not, then these are going to give you plenty of practice of that. And then you always just split it off at the end and get your two solutions. With a difference of squares, this one would factorize as x minus 4 and x plus 4, and then you would just take that forward to solving it. This guy here factorizes as x bracket x plus 3. equal to 0, and then you take that forward and solve it. But like I said earlier, these can all have variations. So what happens, you know, if a 2 ends up in here? Or what happens if I had a 3 there? Or some more difficult number, like, I don't know, like an 8 or something a little uglier. How do you vary your technique? What happens if there's a 2 in there? So we're not going to chat about that in this class, but that's the level you want to get to. Starting off with these kind of more straightforward ones, learning the process, which is not easy, but learning that process, getting comfortable with it, and then trying to adapt that to more difficult scenarios, which I look at in the course. So solving quadratic equations is a super important technique. You'll use it all the way through to sort of pre-calculus. It still appears in calculus. You could potentially be using this for years if you continue with math class. So they never go away, quadratic equations. They appear in many, many different areas. Just getting to the point where you can solve them quickly and comfortably is the ideal scenario. So make sure that makes sense, and then check out a few practice questions.